evidence-driven standards making, policy making, and so on and so forth. But importantly, we can also support with translation of research concepts into products and services. We've got infrastructure that we use not just for the demonstration up to pilot scale and to produce even the initial market run products for clients. We use those same translational research facilities to develop skills and to train the workforce because they are industry-like. Where you would go into a university and find mostly laboratory infrastructure for research. The kinds of infrastructure that is typical of science institutions is the kind of infrastructure that allows us to make products, to make services, and to train the workforce. A good example that I can give is that we work in vaccine and biotherapeutic manufacture, and we're supported by the South African government, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, GIZ, to actually train people end to end to demonstrate pragmatically how you take a candidate vaccine from lab to the clinic. These are the kinds of environments that we provide. So it is about bridging the gap between science and application, about translational infrastructure that allows us to make products and services across the board in key sectors of the economy. It allows us to even valorize IKS. That is one of the programs that we've done on the African continent, where through our agro-processing and medical testing skills, we've taken anecdotal data, we've taken indigenous knowledge and valorized it and produced products that are actually sold on the formal market in order to mainstream indigenous knowledge. And of course, we drive technology commercialization from IP protection and then working iteratively with entrepreneurs to actually make sure that innovations get to the market. So it is in these ways that research institutions can support a capable state, but also institutions can support the economy. And by working in that space between policy and industry, we have a very good handle of policies that might work. We have a very good handle of, frustrations of the innovators. And we try to then ensure that policy talks to these challenges. Now, these are not perfect examples, and the system is not perfect, but certainly it has some germs where others could learn. Thank you for the opportunity.
This is excellent. I think one thing I picked from what you just said, which I see you do a lot, is drafting most of the policy instruments that are out there. You're active in our G20 engagements, you're active in the STISA development. You were one of the experts that came on board with our implementation plan. And I think that's one important role that researchers need to play, is to plug yourself into some of these policy development systems. I have a mentor who used to say that he who drafts controls. And if you don't put yourself into those systems, the policy will be drafted for you, and then you have to do it. So that's very important. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to Dr. William Ross, our youngest APET member. Let's talk about innovation in emerging technology, but particularly the frontier technologies, the new ones that are coming. You won awards like the African Prize for Engineering for your AI tool that is detecting cervical cancer on the continent of AI. I just want an understanding on your role as an APET member, how you see how we can bridge the scientific evidence that the university developed with policy making, as we saw Dr. Rachel came from the angle of researchers. Now I just want to dive into the academic based on your work and your experiences, how you think this can support, not at the continental level, but the national STI policy community. How can we bridge that?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara. And I think I'll just start with a quote from Nelson Mandela, who said that education is one of the strongest components or elements that you can really use to change the world. If you can really fully recognize the potential and the power of education and be able to change the world. So despite the fact that, yeah, there are really efforts to try and translate research from academic institutions, there are still a gap on the African continent. We really see that there is a gap in translating the high impact published papers from academic into really research, to also infect or to really benefit the community, but also inform national policies. There is still that gap. So as APET, as a pathfinder, as a strategic initiative established under NEPAD, so really APET has a strong role in really putting up a mechanism in advising member states, and we talk about member states, include the RECs, including innovators, including academic institutions, on really how best to harness these emerging technologies for their social economic development, but also integrating evidence into policy formulation. So APET, I would really take an example of APET through different initiatives like CJ. I think many of you have heard of CJ. These are the Callista's Human Executive Dialogues. Really, APET has played a strong role in bridging the gap by making sure that it connects the scientists and policymakers. If you really have a gene drive, these are really very extreme technologies. If you really talk to a policymaker about gene technology in parliament, you want to pass a law about gene technology, but they really can't explain what gene technology is, they can't understand what gene technology is, they will definitely not support you. So through such executive dialogues, we can try to make sure that we do have the science and the policymakers come together, that they can really be able to have these concepts well understood. So also APET is really coming up with new other initiatives like the emerging technologies research chairs. That is really a concept with partners that we are working with to make sure that as the innovators, as the researchers, we not only just take and use these technologies, but they really become frontiers involving these technologies. We want to have the next ChatGPT, the next deep thing to come from Africa. This can only come if we really make sure that our scientists are really doing the right thing and are just not adopting the technology, but developing the technology. And also to make sure that we have our scientists can be able to really communicate what they do in a way that can be understood by everywhere. So having such initiatives can really help the policymakers take up the findings from the institutions. Thank you.
I guess the CJ is a very valuable platform that we have that we use in sort of coordinating research to profit management. Now, when I was in the university, I only see my vice chancellor on the university websites and award ceremonies, graduation ceremonies, and so I'm always honored to have a vice chancellor on the panel. I can speak to you. Thank you so much for creating the time to be here. You are a recognized university leader. You mentioned in your introduction how you were the top in terms of the Times ranking from Malawi. Your university was the best last year. How are you aligning the research and innovation that is going on in Rwanda with the STISA 2034 pillars to ensure that even at the university level, the students understand some of these continental strategies and are incorporating them in the research that they do and the work, the outputs that come?
Thank you very much, Dr. So, it's okay, if you don't mind. So, teachers are teachers. But the fact is, the convergence of STISA 2034 and a university like which I'm leading, which is an agricultural university, is just natural, but not just natural, but it's because of one common enemy, which I would want everyone here to be angry about, and that is food essentially. I mentioned in the morning that 1 in every 5 of our Africans, our colleagues, are hungry every day. But not only that, 140 million of our Africans a serious, acute food insecurity. Why is that's the case? It's because our food systems are completely fragile, they are weak, and we need to enhance them. Over time, recent times, we have seen the soils on this continent have degraded. We have seen the pests and occurrence of pests and diseases. We have seen climate change effects, drought, etc., which are affecting our food systems. So it's not by coincidence that STISA, pillar number one, that I want to stress, pillar number one is agriculture. And if you translate that, even in my own country, we've got what we call Malawi 2063. The first pillar is agriculture productivity and commercialization, which means my university, which deals with agriculture, is at the center of STISA 2034. It's at the center of Malawi 2063. It's at the center of the African world. So it is very important. And I want this to sink, that all of us, our attention to agriculture space should be looked at in a very more serious than before. Given the population growth that we've been talking about, we're going to be in more serious challenges if we don't pay attention right now. So as Rwanda, we're aligned. In fact, universities now, we're not just beginning to churn out papers and churn out students. It pains us as a vice chancellor of an agricultural university to see people dying of hunger or people going hungry, which means now the universities architecture has to change drastically to align seriously and in a more emergency way and in very, very fast to respond to the challenges of the agriculture and of this continent. So what we're doing at Rwanda, our research agenda is very dynamic, but not just dynamic, but as I said, very responsive, because things are changing every day. And we do a few things. For example, one of our aims in our research agenda is to strengthen the climate resilient food systems. So which means getting to the farmers, using digital tools, making sure that the farmers are getting right information at the right time. Days are gone when a farmer is attacked by a fall armyworm and they'll stay 2 weeks without a solution. We must provide. And to do that, technology alignment is very important. So we have embraced digital tools in our extension issues, extension messaging, and etc. The other thing is that whatever we're doing in value chains of crops, value chains of livestock, value chains of fisheries, they have to improve. We have seen already. If we're going to industrialize, production has to be number one. So productivity is number one. So we do investigate genetic stability of crops, and as well as developing nutrient-dense crops, biofat fats, maize, etc. And also in livestock, we ensure that we're now embracing digital cattle insurance for animal traceabilities and also solution for livestock sector. We're also developing organic pesticides, having ecological oversight, such as Tephrosia. And these we're putting in not just there, but now we're going to roll it out for the startups so that we can completely bring out organic pesticides to remove the pressure of sometimes the chemical nature of these things. So intensive technology development on aquaculture and fisheries. In fact, my university was some 3 centers of excellence in Africa. One is Center of Excellence in Aquaculture and Fisheries for the whole region with state-of-art equipment, with the idea that this declining fisheries sector that we have on the continent should be dealt with. We see that aquaculture is like a lifesaver everywhere. But what you see in Africa, you find only one country, Egypt, maybe another one, Nigeria, maybe Ghana, etc. Only 4 countries out of 54 countries taking strides in agriculture. And these are supposed to be economic-driven, climate resilience systems, but we see them just scattered here and there. So we are working on that to make sure that we have proper candidates, proper students, well-natured, etc. So far, we've trained more than 400 master students from across the region, about 22 countries. So those are some things that we are doing. But we're also doing other things. We also want to build a lot of partnerships in terms of regional alliances. So as universities, we usually sit there, most of universities, and we do in our own cocoons with our networks, associations. But I think it's very important that we want to align with AU agencies, with CTIRs, and with also UNC Chapter Hill to co-design research to ensure that we have climate smart practices and technology transfer. Our own outreach programs are farmer-centric outreach programs, strengthening extension services, like I said, through smart farms. So we create smart farms, farmers should come, they see what agriculture is all about for this modern day. And I would also say that another very important thing that we do is now to align with the integration of IoT as well as AI in the research. We are into the stage where we want to see that using AI within big data, we are doing diagnostics of the diseases, and at the same time providing solutions real time to the farmer. Farmers in the field, you download, you bring up the data, you provide the solutions, farmers should know what to do at the same time. In other words, we cannot do business as usual as universities, especially in this situation in which we are in the food security sector. Thank you very much for your attention.
The health management colleagues are waiting, and so we have to wrap up. But before then, so I'm sitting in front of my former boss, and she doesn't allow dialogue without questions. So I don't want to hear queries for probably that even the training she gave me. So I'm gonna get some, but we're gonna use a different approach. I don't want questions. I want you to give suggestions or solutions to the panel member. Like, APET, you could be doing this, or you should be doing that. I have a mentor who used to say that don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. What is it that you think APET should be doing that it's not doing? Or ideas that we have? I can take 2 or 3 in the room being process. Please, 30 seconds. Don't disappoint your English teacher. 30 seconds, just summarize, comprehension. Thank you.
Thank you. You would note that private college was about second university in Syria. Then we have 6 public universities in total. We have 12. What we're trying to do as a policy shift, science, but in particular activities. So we had to transform our polytechnics into technical universities. So we're in that move. My request for APET is, I think where we have seen major shift in our own experience review is when there's leadership from the political front, from state house. And that commitment is not just around policy approval, it's also around committing resources to this. We saw this with investment in free quality school education. There's such a huge investment in school education, but then that's not translated in the investment at higher education level at TVET. And that's where you protect the investment. My call to action will be for more advocacy and TVET. So if you talk of renewable energy, which has been a perennial challenge. We cannot industrialize if we don't have energy. We cannot industrialize if we don't have science. And I think this is important. We cannot industrialize if we don't develop the right kind of partnership with the private sector, looking beyond what they can give us to grow, but how they can be mutual benefit. So that will be go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have one more? For gender considerations, I need a lady.
Just giving researchers that I realized that I have used some reports about some things by like during the Pan-African Parliament meeting, and it's older. I think you are considered these techniques to be included as means for enhanced production. So I think APET should also be considered this. I think it's
Thank you. And I'm pleased to share APET actually has been in the policy framework of consumer mediation of the last 8 years. A ladies, you always say you want to be on the table. Ladies, no comment, Dr. Next.
It is really to thank the panelists for first of all making us more aware of how important APET is. I am let mention I come from Makerere University, the School of Medicine, where I'm a big scientist and that for women's health. So, of course, what touches me a bit is all the examples come from very different fields. As a women's health advocate, I think they are really, they need to have tangible solutions to our maternal health problem, but also to have representation at these important tables. I'm happy with what I'm hearing, and I think this meeting on this road to hear about what is going on in terms of many of these challenges, how this is to be done. And I see an opportunity with the academic institutions, some health, and others, industry, everybody, but I think people don't know that great things are happening. Makes them imagine that with all that is going on with funding, probably the world is coming to an end in Africa, but I see this as a silver lining. And I think we were really well prepared for what is going on. And I think it's Zimbabwe who mentioned that sometimes we need the prices move. But I'm happy that we have where it starts. We are using that report. So hope is alive. Thank you.
That so maybe a quick closing remark from each panel member. Please let's keep succeed. I will start with Dr. Rachel because I know I'm taking much of your time today. So what do you have to say to us as your closing?
Thank you very much for organizing this particular session. And thank you very much for the colleagues for the engagement this morning, touching on all the relevant points. I believe that APET has got a very important role to play in the transformation of African economies through knowledge by virtue of their understanding of technology, but as well by virtue of their role in trying to shape policy. I think we should continue to try and do more by way of using universities, research institutions such as the CSIR as sandboxes in which some of these ideas, some of these technologies are reduced to practice and the learnings taken and used to shape policy. So I hope we continue on the path. And I just want to thank my fellow panelists and the people in the room for the contributions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, members, for your time and for really listening in to the panel. My simple word is that implementation of STISA 2034 is a collective effort. Let's all be part of the drive so that we can really be able to achieve the Africa one. Thank you.
all the participants. It's very important session. And my final recommendation to APET is based on what we know. The telecommunications sector of Africa has been using Bitcoin. And once payment is made, once you put your such card, all the stakeholders in the value chain are paid instantly. For the power sector, we have generation, transmission, and distribution. That Bitcoin is yet to come. And the distribution company that sells electricity, that collects money, refuses to pay the GenCos and the transmission company. So I want APET to take the lead to ensure Bitcoin is also used in the African power sector, so that as soon as we buy the electricity credit, all the members of the value chain are immediately paid, and there will be no complaint by GenCos and transmission company. Okay.
Thank you very much. So I really want to see that APET continues or even become a vehicle for universities in Africa, diplomacy. I think we've heard quite a bit in previous sessions about how fragmented our countries are, even though we are fragmented. Can APET play a big role to bridge, to have collaborative research among the various institutions in Africa? The papers that are generated, how do they translate? And that means APET sitting into, like I said, we've got in the university, we've got lots of associations. We've got SAMUA, we've got ARUA, we've got Forum, we've got AAU. But APET has to speak to that. And one of the ways would be also to strengthen the CGAT. Well, that was a vehicle which APET issues were taken to policymakers in various countries. We need to strengthen that linkage and then the both university fraternity with again to also to the research centers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up our session for today. Thank you for your time. Don't go away. We are going to meet the money people to look at health finances, so please stay tuned. Oh yes, a picture.
Maria, where's your picture? Maria, I will take my thing.
Sorry.
Maria has a very good phone.
No, this one. I need a new phone.
Let's our children. Let's not blow the stove. Right?
I want
Don't
to be
cover.
in the picture.
Yes, you come to that.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your deliberations, colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it here?
Yeah.
Then we go to the toilet.
Doctor, is away. Doctor, are you moderating it?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the picture of no, yeah, yeah. Fails. Oh, no.
You want us to go?
So good afternoon, everyone. We are quite behind that schedule. We're supposed to be out of this room in the next 30 minutes. So let's try to make sure that we keep the time. Please, the members going out, you can stay. We are talking about money. Please be around and you see where the money is coming from. just want to confirm if we do have our panel members here. The police are around. Okay, thank you so much. So, gifts are around. And Dr. Robert. Yes, please, you can come and take your seat. So we are just waiting for a gift, then we can start. Wait for gift. You want to check?
So where's the other? If someone that you but just get a little one. I've been to the dance. Still make it there. You're done.
We are just waiting for our panel member. And Robert, they have just stepped out. Okay. There they come. Good afternoon once again. I really take this opportunity to welcome you on this very interesting panel about financing, because everything we talk about, if there is no money, then there is no progress. So I really welcome you to this panel about innovative financing mechanisms for the implementation of STISA 2034. So as we all know that the implementation of STISA 2034 really is not only hinged on having very good strategic policies and activities, but also having a clear and sustainable financing mechanism to make sure that we can really sustain and inclusively domesticize and also implement this in the different countries. So APET has really done something very good, come up with the implementation plan of STISA 2034, which I'm sure very soon we'll be having a copy of this implementation plan. And APET has really highlighted some of the key stakeholders and their roles in implementing. However, we observe that really financing is everybody's responsibility. You cannot say that they are the African member states that fund the partners that are really going to fund this. However, sometimes we realize that if it is everybody's responsibility, sometimes no one is responsible. So please welcome to this panel. So as we really discuss and find out what are some of the practical and possible financing mechanisms that we can really adopt to implement STISA 2034. So on the panel, so we have Mr. Chris, who's the program officer at APET. Thank you so much. Please, you can wave the members. We have Ms. Gift, who's the Director General of the National Commission for Science and Technology, Malawi. Thank you so much for joining us. And we also have Dr. Robert, who's the co-founder and Chief Innovations Officer at the Globe Africa. Thank you so much. So I think we shall take, let's try to be a little bit brief so that we can be able to fit in time. So I will start with, wow, I don't know where I should start from, but I should start from Chris, since you are really part of APET, and as the AU Development Agency and custodian for STISA 2034, how is APET using evidence to support member states in prioritizing and financing STI within their national development plans.
Thank you, William. So at AUD and APET, we are focused on, based on our mandates, we build the capacity of member states. We offer technical support and assistance to member states. And in respect to STI, there are two initiatives that the AUD and APET is leading. One is in terms of capacity building. We do have a program for the innovation, transformation, and resilience for sustainable development. This program basically enhances the capacity of public officials who are involved in science, technology, and innovation indicators. And it's a partnership between the AUD and APET and the University of Lund. And so we enhance the capacity of public officials from mid-level, mid-management level and upper management level, so that they are able to enhance their capacities in terms of planning and policies in STI. The other initiative that we have is on the innovation outlook, the African Innovation Outlook. And basically what we do is to identify where a country is in terms of the policy, institution, and the financial landscape with respect to STI. And therefore we benchmark that with what the Agenda 2063 goals have been set, and they are able to create those goals or those trajectories for themselves in their development plan. And so in these two ways, we enhance capacities of member states to be able to domesticate some of these STI evidence-based initiatives in their development plan. And maybe lastly is we also do have, but this is more broadly, we do have an M&D team at the AUD and APET that helps with the domestication of the Agenda 2063. So this team basically works with the national planning statistics or divisions at the country level, and to help them to have some of these indicators streamlined within the country at the country level. Of course, the Agenda 2063 is very broad. However, STI is part of that. So that is also another way that the AUD and APET is serving. Lastly, and from just the panel that has ended now, the panel discussion is initially how APET was constructed. This is now from a policy advisory perspective. APET was to advise the AU, the member states, and the regs. And therefore, one of the recommendations, again, that came from the first session is how do we then bring that linkages between country level and APET directly. And that would be one of the ways that AUD and APET again is looking to enhance evidence for development.
Thank you so much. I think it deserves that. It's very, very good. Thank you so much. So I'll then go to Ms. Gates. Surely, thank you so much. Now you have a lady on the panel. I think we are all very happy. Unlike our panel, like a female physically around.
Like 2 females.
Yeah. So given your role as a Director General at NC, at the National Council for Science and Technology, so what mechanisms have the National Council for Science and Technology have to mobilize domestic resources for STI, especially with the constrained national budgets, and how are some of these initiatives really informed by evidence?
So I guess I should do first things first. Firstly, the issue of human capacity. Then I will draw on from there to how we have mobilized our resources. So first, the issue of developing human capacity, probably in the issues of STI indicators. We've had trainings by AUD and APET on how we do the R&D service, and also we have benefited from the Lund trainings that he talked about on how we deal about with STI indicators. And then because of that, we've been able to do our R&D survey. We had one that was done in 2019, and the data from there was able to inform the African Innovation Outlook. So Malawi is, its data is available in the current 2025 African Innovation Outlook. Again, we have also done the Business Innovation Survey, which is being done currently in collaboration with the National Statistics Office. And then we have developed procedures and guidelines for the technology transfer officers. Somebody talked about the innovation chasm, the value of their challenges, so that we reach the research results to commercialization issues. So the technology transfers are being developed in our universities as well as R&D institutions. So this has trickled down to inform the development or the review of our policies. For example, at the moment, we are reviewing our science, technology, and innovation policy. The information that is enabled us to review the policy has come from the information that, or the data that we've gathered from the R&D survey, as well as the Business Innovation Survey, as well as technology needs for Malawi. So all this to happen, the information has come from the R&D survey as well as the Business Innovation Survey, and then again the technology needs for Malawi. And then we are also busy establishing frameworks between the higher education institutions as well as the industry. That work is going on so that we have the linkage between the industry and private sector as well as our universities. Now, how are we mobilizing domestic resources to enable us maybe domesticate STISA and then do our functions as or research and innovation issues in the country. Firstly, we have benefited from the Science Granting Council initiative, which is an initiative of 14 or thereabouts councils in Africa, benefiting from donor funding from IDRC, SIDA, FCTO, NORAD, GRIF, as well as NRIF in South Africa. So this has enabled us to give out research grants to our researchers and innovators. And then apart from the support in terms of research, we have also been able to benefit from capacity building. And then that's the first one, Science Granting Council initiative in terms of resources. The other, where we have mobilized resources is through the Global Grand Challenges initiative. From the previous session, where Kedest was a panel, was on the panel, she was able to articulate about the global challenges in the initiative. Malawi is also part of that panel. What happens in there is that Malawi put in resources to the kitchen, and then the donors like Melinda Gates also bring in funding into the kitchen. That way, we have a lot more funding that will give out our researchers and innovators. So what it means is that the country has to put in more resources into the kitchen in order to benefit more the other partners. So Malawi operationalized its science and technology in 2020-2021. That Professor Kauma, who is the Vice Chancellor of one was our board chair. So he initiated and worked so that Malawi is part of the Grand Challenges Fund. Then through that, we're able to benefit from the initiatives the institutions like the Bill and Gates. And then creating awareness at the legislative level as well as the executive level of the government is very important and critical, so that we are able to show to the legislators as well as the policy makers the need for them to increase funding into the research and development initiatives for sector. So for us, what has worked is that we operationalize the Science and Technology Fund. The National Commission for Science and Technology was started its operations in 2009, but it's only in 2020 that the Science and Technology Fund was operationalized because the government now started putting in resources into the fund. That way, we are able to fund our research and innovation priorities. We have a national research agenda for the country that's aligned to the Malawi 2063, our book for the country. The national research agenda has priorities of the research that we want to do in order to solve our local challenges. Where does the mandate to fund the priorities in the national research agenda come from? It will come from the Science and Technology Fund. And I'm happy that we have that operationalized. We are able to fund our priorities that are available with the national security. So the other issue is ensuring that maybe our legislators that are also able to see research in action. So once in a while, we organize what people see is believing, like few days activities whereby we take the policymakers, the legislators, stations so that they're able to see the benefits or how research solve the challenges that we face. So I'm thinking that those issues are the ones that have helped us to ensure that we mobilize domestic resources for our research and innovation ecosystem in the country, as well as creating or establishing the framework whereby you're linking the private sector, the industries, as well as the universities, as well as engaging philanthropists. We are making sure that we continue engaging our rich people in the country so that they are also able to sponsor research and innovation in the innovation sector. Let me stop there.
Thank you so much for those very useful insights. I think also other member states that are here can really pick something to how it's doing to advance financing of its STIA. Thank you so much. So then we really want to hear from Dr. Robert. On the continent, you need to think we don't have data sets to do research. Actually realize that you have a lot of data sets, but maybe the data sets are not well structured, but you have quite a number of data sets available. We used to think that African member states maybe don't have money. That's what you always say, don't have money. But you have to realize that these governments have a lot of money, maybe because of misplaced priorities, but the governments really have money. So the same for financing, providing funds for innovators. We need to think that actually there is no fund, there are no funds to support innovators and innovations on the continent. But we have to realize that we have so many funders and opportunities around the continent and innovation. So from your experience supporting early-stage innovators across Africa, how do you think we can really better structure these financing mechanisms? We ensure that they are really informed by real evidence, they are sustainable, and also they are impactful in terms of scaling these innovations.
Yes. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Just as I'm thinking of answering that question, I'm asking myself, how many of us here are from the private sector, accelerators, or venture studios? So the picture of hands. Do investors also have their hands up? Venture capital. So somewhere, academia, policy. Okay, no problem. So it's a big question, and kind of helps me to just get a sense of how to speak to the question. So impact investment is really different from traditional investors. And by traditional investors here, I'm thinking of venture capital and private equity. So we remove banks and the loans for now, and just basically say, how do you build a knowledge economy? How do you translate research to products and services in the marketplace? So the kind of risk capital that you're going to need will have to be from people who provide high risk tolerant capital. Impact investors, on top of that, are going to say, we want to see social impact, not just profit. And so today, when we talk about how do we fund the science, technology, innovation agenda for Africa, impact investment actually does have a big role to play, primarily because we talk about right now, especially as you've seen with Trump, a huge transition from aid to trade. So how do we meet with that? We're going to need people who can provide capital that not necessarily wanting to get the typical market returns, but they're willing to forgo some of that in order to see social impact. So that bridge between aid to trade is primarily what impact investors do. And they typically do this through various channels, as I said earlier. It could be private equity, it could be venture capital, it could be venture studios, accelerators, incubators, and so on and so forth. So how do we structure this kind of funding? So this is not coming from government, it's coming from private sector. Typically, it's going to be, yes, high net worth individuals, their family offices that manage their wealth, And basically they're saying we don't want to lose money. We don't want to at least beat inflation. If you can show me that the returns you give me are going to beat inflation, that's good enough. But let it also do social impact, whether it's agriculture, food security, health security, environment, or whatever. But they want to see impact. Plus, they need you to at least beat inflation. So it's fairly good money to work with. And as Vilgro, we've deployed this money primarily as grants because we invest in early stage ventures working in health and life sciences. Sometimes it's too early to put in return-seeking capital. We actually put in grants, and then we can then transition at a later stage after we've reached it to a certain point to working with equity or convertible notes. And then typically, we've also done grants, by the way. We've done about $1 million worth of grants to academia. And this is basically getting academia to come and provide R&D services with our portfolio companies. Because a lot of times there's a huge challenge in terms of how we think of private sector. So for me, every time I hear the private sector, I don't think those big multinationals. I'm thinking that little startup that typically will be struggling to get access in terms of even being able to get an appointment with you. But they're the ones that, especially if they're spinning off our research from academia, they're the tech transfer mechanism of research in our universities into the marketplace. So if we ignore them at our own peril. Development, no industrialization in Africa, if we don't pay attention to startups. So how do we structure impact investment? How do we structure funding for innovation much more effectively? My argument will be very simple. We really need to understand it's a knowledge economy game. We need to be able to say, how do we, especially working with impact investment and government funding, take that first loss position so that if you're deploying money and I know the persons that are going to come in at later stages when it's beginning to scale, typically are not going to be interested in the social good. They just want to make sure that their shareholders are happy. How do you ensure that we de-risk technology for them? We de-risk the commercial risk for them. So that first mover, what do you call it, first loss investment thinking is what will be critical. I'd also say, how do you structure it? I think we've had a lot of conversations, and I love even the one that just mentioned about the grant challenges. But I also tell myself sometimes if we were to be more intentional, because for example, earlier it was yesterday, I did send some of the conversations about impact bonds, for example. And I've always asked myself, why don't we use impact bonds for our industrialization purposes? If you think about it, it's about de-risking. And impact bonds are basically the way we utilize them right now, especially, for example, in health, it would be, we want to see an impact, for example, of reducing maternal mortality rates. By the time you then produce the evidence of that particular target or goal, it makes it makes everybody believe that impact bonds are extremely expensive to achieve. Whereas if you were to take our universities, and for example, going back to Prof, and he talked about the aquaculture, also, like the blue economy kind of innovation center of excellence that he has. That's a specific cluster that can emerge from that. But be able to attract funding into that cluster. I think government and impact investment should actually be able to think, how do we build out whether it's a social impact board or a development impact board, but with outcome metrics that are industrialization metrics. How many jobs were created? How much revenue was created by the startup? How much did we see people in terms of the value chains expanding and exports and forex earnings? So different, very simple things that you can capture quickly, even that the government actually probably does routinely, I think would be one of the most amazing ways, so that we can be able to tell our governments, yes, we're producing knowledge. Yes, it's too risky for the traditional business models to work with, whether it's loans or what have you. But if you allow us to bring in this funding, let us work with it, but you become the outcome payer. If we're going to hit the targets of X amount of jobs, X amount of revenue, X improvement in balances of trade, things that you routinely monitor, so you can clearly tell whether we achieved it or not, then you, as the outcome payer, give back the money that we got from our
high-risk investors would be telling me, again, what do you call them, the impact investors or philanthropic venture capital. So to me, it's a matter of being imaginative and understanding how do we really build a knowledge economy, and it's gonna be nothing new. It's just like you set us up here, triple helix, private sector, academia, and government. And once we're able to read off the same script, then it's really very easy to unlock the potential we have within this continent.
Thank you so much. It was very insightful. Thank you so much. So we really thank our members, our panel members. So surely thank you so much, Chris. Chris really gave some practical steps that are being taken by APET and APET to really support the member states. I think that was very, very useful. It has really shown us the Malawi way, the SGI fund, the research action, the research in action, and the government input. These are really very, very insightful and very, very useful. Robert, thank you so much for really sharing some of the insights on how best you think we can really structure the financing for these innovations, including putting in place a technology transfer mechanism. I think that is very, very, very key. I like what you talked about, that first lose investment. If your government hasn't been able to trust you with $100 US, how do you expect an external person to give you $1 million US? So I think that is something very, very good. And the government engagement, I think that is also very, very good. So I really open up the floor for discussion. At least let's get some 3 questions from the audience. You can ask anyone that you want. Then after that, I'll come back to the panel members and give them an opportunity to give their closing remarks. So the floor is open. So any questions, suggestions, you want to learn more about impact bonds? Please.
Coming from a regional organization, sort of funding the implementation of STISA, as the Southern Indians, first states, we have come up with a regional development fund. So that fund itself is going to be broken into different sub-funds, of which Regional Innovation Fund will also form part of that Regional Development Fund. So it's more like when you look at the Southern Metropolitan Science Technologies Institute, it's more linked to STISA. Now we are working on the review because STISA has been reviewed. So we want to align the objectives of the protocol for the region with the objectives of the strategy for the future. So that's what we are doing. We are currently working on, and we have advanced in terms of establishing that fund because it has been approved by all the member states. So it's more like yeah, we have a solution which we so I think something that I can suggest is the diaspora investment. Maybe we should try to look at the diaspora investment, take that angle, because we know they have all the some or many, they have all that possibility for that potential to fund some of the small businesses, including the startups. Because sometimes we make a mistake of confusing the startups and the small businesses. Because the startups are more techno-based than small businesses. So I think that the issue of diaspora investment can also assist in terms of raising funds for them. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. The regional fund, I think regional development fund, that's I think very good news. So any other comments from the audience? Do you have any? So if we don't have
if there is nothing, then not a question, it's say that I'm just contributing to the discussions. I think the other thing is in terms of funding may not be a problem, but the challenge may be we have to maybe come up with nation-oriented policies, innovation policies. We should be able to develop policies that are nation-oriented. And where you are solving something for the society. So if we develop such nation-oriented policies, then it will be easy to get funding from our governments.
Okay. Sure. Thank you so much.
Knowledge economy. It's also important to think about the attention economy. Because we are at an era where whoever gets more attention gets the most. So how can we match these two? We get people talking about this more often, so that as much as we are academician talking about evidence for policy development, we also have to be very aware of what's happening. So let's STISA, so that now we can get like-minded people wiring together towards a common goal for the African front.
Thank you so much. So we shall now hand over the mic to our panel members to give their conclusion remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Waswa. My conclusion remarks will really revolve around how do we move forward more concretely in terms of steps. And I think it would be a very great opportunity to liaise with our colleague from the Senate, because in the STISA implementation plan 2024, I was involved in the drafting of that document. We indeed have, it is divided into two phases. The first phase where you have the socialization document and so on. But in the first phase also you do have operationalization of the Africa Science, Technology and Innovation Fund. And I think then with that we can sort of find synergies on how then we can have it more at a regional level than from a continental level. And I'll be happy to take this conversation further with you on that. In terms of the financing landscape, I see this as a blessing in disguise, and I see us being now forced to have a conversation that we have postponed for long, and in terms of domestic financing for ourselves. With the chips, and the pronouncement from Washington, I see this as an opportunity where we can really, face the difficulties in the room and say, look, if we don't fund this thing for ourselves, no one will be it. And this is a conversation that has been postponed for so long. And I'm glad even member states are now realizing that, yes, we have to do it and we have to do it ourselves. So I remain optimistic. I see it as a positive news for me. I don't see it as, wailing moment, but I see it as, yeah, this is an opportunity that has been handed to Africans. Take charge, forcefully, although painfully, but we will make it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So for me, it's the issue of collaboration. Collaboration two fronts. One, we are talking of people health, government, academic, and private. But we also have to include the citizens, citizen science. So we have cooperation for ideation of ideas. If we forget them, it means that the solutions that we're coming up with are not going to solve our societal challenges. So in whatever we do, we should remember, who are we trying to research for? Where are the results going to be impacted? So let's remember our communities out there. Secondly, on the issue of reporting, data collection on our indicators, I think it's been said that maybe our reporting on issues like gross expenditure on R&D, it's not the correct one. Because the data collection that is being done is fragmented, not right, because we leave out other sectors. For example, in Malawi, NCST is mandated to collect that data. But more often we find that maybe some of the researchers do not report. The researchers maybe that get funding from donors are not reporting, but the research is being done in Malawi and then benefiting somehow Malawians. But that aspect of data is not reported. Thereby lowering our trade expenditure. At the moment it's 0.17, but when you do it right, you find that maybe the expenditure is not even 0.1. African Union says 1%, we are on 0.17, which is not right, but I think that is because of the gaps that we have on data reporting. So continue with capacity building so that we do these things right, STI indicators. And then again, we need to ensure that our policymakers are part and parcel of this forest. I'm happy that our PS of Economic Planning and Development came here, is being able to see and understand what research and innovation ecosystem is all about. When we go back to him and say we need more funding, we'll be able to understand because he's seen it, he's healthy, from other sectors, from other mouths. A prophet is one without honor in their own country. By go talk to him, if the VC goes to talk to him, he will not be able to understand, but if he gets it from some type of orders, we will be able to understand what we're talking about. So let's continue ensuring that we invest them so that we're not pushing to ourselves. We are already competent, but those that are not competent should come be part and parcel for this. And then I'm also thinking about the funding that is already available for us as Africans from like the African Development Bank, the African Education, Science, Technology and Innovation Fund. I know that out of the 55 African countries, just Ghana and South Africa that have committed resources to that fund. If you commit resources to the fund, that's when you are able to benefit. So some of us have been committed, but we haven't committed because maybe our policymakers are not involved. So that's why the more we involve them, the more they'll be able to understand and commit so that we're able to benefit from such type of funding, and that funding will go to our innovation and our research sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. For me, in closing, I'm saying, I think STISA 2034, we're going to do things differently. What I really would have to see is this mindset. Research is investment. What is our return on investment to our government? How do we articulate it to them? What is our investment thesis? And going back to my earlier remarks, I think let's do science and research. Talk of economic clusters, scientific disciplines or engineering disciplines, and then help them to understand by investing in this. This is how you build or how you still develop the goose that lays the golden eggs. And this is exactly how much can go back. Whether it is, because what are we doing for them? What we're talking about doing for them is building the formal sector. There's something that Africa lacks right now. It's the formal sector. It's shrinking. It is literally getting out of existence. Because what I need to is the Kool-Aid of microfinance, micro-entrepreneurship, small things, nothing scalable. And when it comes to industrialization, what our governments do, rather than to invest in technology that is very high risk because it has not been risked, has not been commercialized, they set up EPZs and special economic zones. So in essence, we keep on importing technologies, whether it's for manufacturing or whatever it is, nothing's going to change until us who are in the academia, the scientists, the engineers, start asking what's our investment thesis? What exactly are we bringing to the table? Why is it worth to give me that $1? So let's get our acts together. Let's really, if we are smart enough to come up with the technical solutions, believe you me, you're smart enough to come up with the commercial solutions. It's not rocket science. I can take any scientist, any engineer, give them a crash course in an MBA within 2 weeks, and you go out there and you actually be a what you can do. I can't do that with an MBA. I can't teach them the science. I can't teach them the engineering, and I know you can't either. So the reality is value creation is done by STEM. But this STEM people need to be entrepreneurial. And we need to ask the hard questions. Where is STISA's investment thesis? How does the rubber meet the road? It's gonna come down to clusters. And then it's gonna come down to making sure that the capital we get has that, plays that role of the first loss investor. If we get that right, we are off the races. If we don't get it right, we'll be back here in 2034 talking of STISA 2044. No change, because we are speaking purely as scientists. Let's change up our game. Let's actually embrace the role of entrepreneurial scientists, entrepreneurial engineers, and speak to the knowledge economy more effectively by providing a clear, succinct investment thesis. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. I think you need to clap for them at the same time. I think that's a little. Thank you so much, our panel members. So let's just take a group photo for. Since we don't have anyone online, we can just remain here. Let's wait for that.
Oh, okay. There's one session. The session on air.
So I'll hand over back to Barbara. So we are late, we are behind the time by 20 minutes. So if you have anything else, it should be less than 20 minutes.
Yeah, sorry, please, there's one amazing session. One very exciting discussion being led by Mozilla Foundation on artificial intelligence. It's going to be a brief session just before lunch, and then you're sort of wrapped up with our AD sessions for the day. So can I please invite Mark to introduce?
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, standing in the way of lunch. We're trying to be as quick as possible. I hope you will learn a lot in this discussion that you're going to have. I will call my panelists, directing sound called my discussants. So I will call Dr. Lilian Wanzare from the University of Kaseno. Lilian has been on the ground doing a lot of work creating Fopora, and we will learn how this facilitates the work in AI in the continent. I will next ask Brighton Mwasaro. He's been a Mozilla Fellow. He's worked a lot with communities, and I want to hear what you will say about the work that he does for the community that want to work with them, collect language, and talk about how benefits flow to them. And I will invite Dr. Melissa Oliva. She's the director of the CPT, is the Center for Intellectual Property Law, and IT and Intellectual Property Law at Stanford University. And Melissa will be talking to us today about community and benefits and how we should think about language and culture. And then lastly, I'll invite someone as well. All right. So someone is from Digital Uganda, based in Kigali, Rwanda. And they have been doing a lot of work since 2019, 2020 to collect Kinyarwanda. Some is supposed to be here, that we do not have time. So we'll just start. We'll start with our session. And I want it to be as informal as possible.
I want it to be as informal as possible so that we can learn and understand what are some of the issues. Myself, my name is Mark Leruda. On how to teach on language and how can they create these language repositories as digital public tools so that they can be leveraged to build technology. So I will invite each one of you to maybe start by telling us what you do. I'll preempted the introduction. So tell us what you do, why AI matters to you, and why language matters to you. So I'll start with this.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. It's horrible to be in the panel just before lunch. So we're going to try and make it interesting and fast and hear what's in somehow. Okay, so CIPIT is the Center for Intellectual Property and Information Technology Start University. And CIPIT essentially is an independent research center, and our work is to produce evidence-based research for policy-making purposes. So essentially, we support policymakers, and that's reasonable. So it makes sense of that, yeah. Now, in terms of language, I should first mention our 4 new areas. 1 is artificial intelligence, which everybody is talking about. 2 is data governance and data flows with artificial intelligence, but it is not the new oil. We will explain that later. And then 3 is intellectual property, and finally, IT, law, and policy. So language intersects with 3 of these areas. 1, artificial intelligence, 2, data governance, and intellectual property. Currently, Africa taking space in the artificial intelligence ecosystem is around the data that we have that these artificial intelligence models can utilize, especially when it comes to language. So language is part of the data that is currently being collected to fuel artificial intelligence. And I'm sure you can think about ways in which language would enrich your space or your sector, as you've been talking about sectors, right? And economic tools. For me, language pops up as intellectual property because I think about it as a cultural asset, which is communally owned. And I also think about it as data or data sets. And also I think about it as it's just about to say the fuel. I think about it as the crucial element for natural language. And intellectual property is something I'm passionate about, community is something I'm passionate about, and then the rest you'll hear in the discussion.
So Lillian, as you talk, I want you to explain to us what you do, but what a corpus is and why it is relevant to AI, this AI thing we keep hearing about.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll start with an example. Okay, I think all of us, I don't think there's any one of us who has not asked that question. It'll actually be a crime if you're here and have never asked a question to ChatGPT. Okay? And sometimes we ask ourselves, yeah, what language does ChatGPT speak? Okay, it speaks English. Yes. It speaks some Swahili, I think it does, yeah. What would it take for you to speak? Can you ask something? Okay. How many of our communities or how many of our citizens actually have the capacity to ask ChatGPT a question? Okay. Are there people who are left out if technology only is in a particular language, not another word? Then the people who are left out, and the divide will even be now wider between those who can and those who do what? So how do we bridge this gap? There comes AI and language words. The chicken and the egg thing is the language has to come first to teach the AI to speak the words, the language. It is not a miracle. You can't wake up and say that GPT speaks French. It has to be taught how to speak. And the language comes from who? Unity. It's a community who speaks the language. So if you are to teach ChatGPT to speak Kamba, you have to go to the Kamba community, ask them to give us their words, language for us to come and teach these people, only for us to sell them back the Chatita speaks Kamba back to them, for them to use the Chatita and pay for what? Pay for it. Okay. So who comes first? So yet the tool is going to be used by us. The data comes from us, but again, give the data and pay for the words. What is a corpus? The corpus is just if I go to the community and ask you to collect the language, I will store it digitally. Okay. For translation, for instance, it can be a text in Kikamba and a text in what? In Swahili. That will be used to run a system to move from Swahili and Kamba and what? If it is a voice recognition system, as I speak Kikamba, it transcribes it. What do I need? The corpus will be the text in Kamba and recordings of people from Kamba reading the what? Text in what? So I have a mapping between the text and the words. That is the voice. What is used to train the words? The one. So what comes in is IP. Who owns the data? Where's the language? If I give you the data, who is supposed to benefit from it? What governance structures exist to govern this data? Is it a public good? Okay. For things like that. So how do we fuel this conversation of who owns the data? How do we use the data? Who can access the data? Who pays for the data? It's all a whole conversation about governance and also bridging the digital divide, but more importantly, it's a policy issue. As Africans ourselves, technology is brought to us, but we should be building this technology for us to be able to use it in our given words.
So Brighton, also as you share about your work, you work with the, I use the mic?
Yeah, I was trying to find it.
And you share, like talk about, you work with communities extensively. So tell the audience, okay, don't defend communities, but it will raise a storm. What you do is like say they, right? And what is your work and why has your work been so important? Like building up on what evidence share.
So from what Lilian mentioned, data is very critical, and Mozilla's main mission is to build a healthy internet. So if you have an internet or tools that don't understand how we speak, it becomes a huge problem. So I'm on the Mozilla Common Voice team that this is a project that lets communities come together, then build data sets for their own languages. So she was talking about Kamba. So the Kamba community can come together, then use the Mozilla Common Voice platform, then go within the communities and build their own voice data sets that can then be used by AI engineers and machine learning engineers, train models and build voice-enabled tools that will then understand. So that's where the Common Voice project is coming from. And through the work, we were focused on the Swahili language. We were a team of 3, focused on Kenya, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So if you understand Kiswahili, it's spoken very differently in the 3 countries, which was a huge challenge, a very interesting challenge for us. So Marcus mentioned, talk about who was the community, right? So community was any ordinary Swahili speaker, anyone who can read sentences in Swahili, be able to contribute to the project. By contributing, I mean, on the platform, you get a sentence in Swahili, then just record yourself reading that sentence, then you submit. So that way, we're able to contribute towards an asset that is very diverse. So we've been working in the 3 countries. So we worked with a whole lot of people. We worked with linguists. We worked with people who are interested in Swahili culture. We worked with writers. We worked with amateur writers who are interested in practicing through the writing competitions. We worked with women from different groups. We worked with women who are interested in women's stories existing data sets. So, for example, there was a writing competition around women heroes across the 3 countries. So that goes back to enriching data sets and retaining that history in the data sets that we have. So those were the people who worked with the process.
You can go ahead and talk about why you are late. Okay, talk about your work and what Digital Uganda is doing, because a lot of what has been captured. you've done in the setting. And you can tell the audience a little bit about the Kenya language and why it is important.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I went outside. Yeah, I'm Samuel and I work at Teaching Uganda. We are an open data sets and NLP company. NLP is very part of the AI that deals with languages. And then, yeah, we've been working to create the data learning innovation. So why it's important, I'll give an example. We work with community health workers. They administer care, and the Rwandan government has a plan in the next 5 years to have 95% of the care taking place at the primary health care. So the community health workers, these are volunteers who they give their time, but they just have basic education. So how do you improve healthcare? How do you capture, how do you help the patients at the primary level with community health workers who've been trained? I think their training is 6 weeks. So one thing we are currently looking at is, can AI help? Some of our work, actually, we get them to ask some questions, and we find that LLM actually outperforms local doctors. So it's something to think about. But when you look at the technology, it's one side, but the community health workers can only speak in Rwanda. I think within Rwanda, 76% of Rwandans only speak and understand in Rwanda, which means if you want to build the technology that can support the work of those community health workers and other different members within the community, different domains, you have to start with the language, because the language is that person interface with which they interact.
Thanks, Sam. I'll come to you, Lillian, then Melissa, and ask why is it important to view our culture and our languages from lens that seems very Western, it seems very commercial or economic, and from an economic benefit perspective. Why is it important, and why is this happening uniquely to AI or to language?
Okay, thank you. Why do we need to deal it in this economic sense out of the language? Look at the example that someone has given. Okay. At the end of the day, this tool that is going to be used to revolutionize, service delivery is going to be in a local language. Yes. If you're going to develop the next generation tool to support our kids to learn the language, train them in CBC, local language, is commercialized. If you think about e-citizen, the e-citizen was supposed to be possible, okay? But even Kikuyu is able to check how do you register land in the local language and be able to find that information. That is good. So in the realms of AI, it means that this data, that is the engine that makes the AI works, has to be looked at as a good, that is going to be used to be able to enable us to move forward into this new revolution, AI revolution. Unless you do that, then you have to think about carefully. It's not just language. At the end of the day, it is something that is going to really enable us as a country or as an African continent. If that is the case, then how do we store it? Historically, as Africans, we're very poor in writing in our own language. What I do, I'm a quotation linguist. So we go out and collect linguistic words and data. For you to find a book written in Masai, for you to find a blogger blogging in Kikuyu, like we do not write in our language. So we have to go and collect. Yet we're supposed to generating language naturally as part of our day-to-day activities. Okay? Apart from radio stations, we don't collect any language, maybe the local radio station. So now because of that, for us people to move forward in the language, if we don't have digital formats of this language that is now looked at as a good, then there is no way of moving forward in AI in our languages. Then we just stick to English or French and forget about our language. Then think about that, then let's see how do we package this language? How do we make it work? If we are to share it, how do we share it? It doesn't become extractive. Okay, because at the end of the day, the tools will be used for us and for sisters, and we are the one to do this. So really, it's really in an economic sense. Look at our language data as a fuel for AI.
So I'm going to give a slightly different answer. I think we think about language commercially because I think we think about language commercially because we are forced to think about it commercially by those who run the artificial intelligence ecosystem. They don't view language as culture the way we look at language as culture. They don't even understand language as a cultural asset. Because these are conversations that I have with them and they look at me like I have 2 heads. For us, language is cultural because there are certain things in language that you cannot translate into the Western concept. There are certain things that are sacred that they do not understand. And language carries with it these cultural aspects. But for them, they want exactly what Dr. Lilian has explained. They want a data set that they can use to run a model so that they can sell the model to you. And when they do that, it means that we must also put on our commercial hat and say, okay, what are you going to give us for this data set? Otherwise, it's actually a very foreign concept. If you go to the local language communities, meaning the people who give their language, or where language is collected, grandmothers, uncles, elders within these communities. If you go to them and ask them, what benefit would you want for this language? They don't have an answer because they do not quantify it as a commercial thing. We have to teach them to quantify it as a commercial thing. And then the only thing they think about it as is money. And if you think about a language data set, they collect thousands of hours. If you think about 3,000 hours, you need 3,000 people to contribute to that data set. If you're given money, you divide it by 3,000 people. Does it make commercial sense? So essentially, language in the African context is very awkward in terms of commercial sense. But we are now forced to come up with frameworks that can commercialize it. Otherwise, it is exploitation and extra.
Okay. So Dr. Denisa, thank you. I want to come back to you because you have to win. There are policy makers in the room. There are policy makers in the room, and there are researchers in the room, and there are people who can influence policy. How would you frame this political conundrum on language when they are thinking about it in enacting policy or thinking about AI strategy in their countries before you? Thank you.
Okay. So there's also this question as whether we view it as data and think about it and govern it as a data set, or we think about it as intellectual property, because these are 2 different frameworks. What are we currently doing as researchers? We are doing it all. We're doing all of it, and we're providing evidence for all of it. I think the first thing that has to be determined is how are Africans showing up in the AI ecosystem so that we can govern how we show up. Currently, we're showing up as data producers. Some people will say data farmers, call it what you want. We are giving our data to the AI ecosystem. That is the current value. People are being funded to collect data. So there's value there. So we have to think about what are the frameworks around how this data can move across borders, and not from Kenya to Rwanda, but from Africa
to the global norm. We talk about, oh, there's interoperability, cross-border data flows. That's wonderful, that's trade law, and I know that's where a lot of you are very comfortable in. But think about this as the assets that we have in museums out there. There are a lot of African assets in foreign museums. Those museums people pay to access. Is that money repatriated back? So if our language is being collected and will be moved elsewhere to help build models, because in Africa, we are not yet building models. That's another thing that we need to move towards. We need to think about how do we move from being data producers to being actual developers, okay? Because our developers are being relegated to collectors and they have way more skills than just collect. So that's the second thing. But I think we need to have the economists, the AI technologists, the lawyers sit together in a room and think about a framework that will govern how this data moves. Currently, what I am doing together with Professor Chijoke is coming up with an alternative license, which is intellectual property, for African data sets. So not just language. Language is one of them, but we are fairly certain that people will move from language to other African data sets. So we have thought of a license where this can help, and it's a tiered license. But we can have the license. If we don't use it, then it's futile, right? So I think we need to think about including some of these things in our policies and our strategies in terms of what licenses should we use for things that are cultural assets, because policymakers can make those decisions. And then communities can then be advised about those decisions. So essentially, it's to understand what's happening in the ecosystem and start making plans for what is already happening. But thinking towards the future, it's about model development and thinking about how we can govern model development. Otherwise, we will miss the AI bus by just contributing data and then no longer be relevant, and other than consumers of the products.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give a clap. Yes. Thank you for being part of this. I'll come to you.
So I think Dr. Melissa raised a very interesting point around the building the models themselves. So one thing during our fellowship was that we had to try and build some stuff using the assets that we were building. So one thing idea was for the fellows to build a tool that can be used by the public, but then we decided let's make it open. We did what we call a use case grant, where we asked people to send to submit applications on stuff that they want to build using the Kiswahili voice data sets. So what we got was around 6 groups or teams to be able to build stuff on the Kiswahili data sets. And it was very interesting to see that there's a team here in Nairobi, in Kenya, called Think, that was able to build a model that worked very well. Also, one of the previous fellows who was working in the Rwanda language he now has a startup called Pindo.ai that is using the Kiswahili voice data set that we built. This was interesting because for us it was a test to see is the data set that we're building really working? Is it how diverse was the data set that we're building? So as Dr. Melissa mentioned, I think the other most important thing is the model development. Because if you look at the teams, I think then the number of teams that have uploaded their models on Hugging Face. The Hugging Face is a platform where people upload this stuff that you can now go check and try out. Also, the Kiswahili data set is in the public domain. There's a whole discussion around all that, but for Mozilla, the Common Voice project right now, all the data set is in the public domain. So it means a student, a researcher, an innovator is able to go take that data set and try and build their own models. Because for us to be, Mozilla believes that putting this in the open goes into building a healthy.
Thanks, Brighton. I'll come to you, Sam, very quickly. My question is, you have done a bit of community work. and we've heard about the challenges. Okay, we will not try to define community, it's very challenging. What do they see? What do they see or what do they want out of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And what we try to draw them is the end result. Yeah, the data set, and sometimes it's not fun. It's just a bunch of data, text there or voice. But what comes out, I think that's the most important, the models as they explain. So what we try to show them is the end result, where we can say with this, it will enable access to information, either in education, in health, in try to explain it to them. And then also, from my experience, we tend to target a certain community. I think we found out that religious community is very strong. So like in the literal work, so they can read the religious text. So when we work with them, and then we explain the outcome, I think they are energized. But obviously, these are things that takes time. And I think our work we started in 2019. Now that's when we are starting to see, let's say, the tree germ. So the data sets will be like planting the seed, but now we're starting to see, okay, well, we can say, oh, we are doing this domain like in health or in education, but it takes time. But ultimately, they are part of the community and they are aware. And then once we do that, we reach out to them and see their contribution.
All right, thank you, thank you. This is my last question. It comes to you, Lilian. So the title of this panel was Who Owns the Words? Can we tell the audience who owns the words, or we can't yet? Tell us about the work that I was told that specifically to give a shout out to the work that you're doing, that is funded by GSF, of course supported by Mozilla, to kind of actualize that. So I don't want to describe it. I want you maybe to give the audience a snippet of the work, what you know, what you still don't know, so that they can appreciate the magnitude and the challenge of defining, because this is what we are doing, we're defining African AI.
Thank you so much. So I run what is called Ken Corpus. So Ken Corpus is just from the word is Kenyan language corpus. And we say the corpus is just digitized text or digitized text. So Ken Corpus has the aim of digitizing languages that are spoken in Kenya in a way that can be ingested to the AI systems. Okay? In that it has been a way that can be used by AI systems to be modeled to be able to do some particular AI translation, whatever kind of thing. But now the question is, if then we are to build a corpus, we have to go to the allow me to use this word now, the owners of the language, or go to the community, okay? Explain to them what Samuel has said, why we need to collect the data from them, the end product they're going to use it for, so that they're able to take part and record themselves speaking their words, so that they can be part of this case. So the discussion we're having is this, okay? They are contributing to building this purpose of building this text. So in principle, yeah, I cannot say because Lilian speaks Luo, and because Lilian recorded 2 hours, that data belongs to me. Because even Lilian got the Luo from our old words, unity. It was passed down to, and not all the Luo was in it. Okay? So I cannot say the data belongs to me because I recorded it. Yes, because I recorded it in 2 hours, I have IP over it, because I'm going to patent it. Yes? If I record 10 hours of Lilian speaking, that it's an IP. It is my data, it's my voice, I'm going to record it. Okay? If all of us collect and we put it together in one corpus, so does it mean that each one of us owns IP of part of that water data? Or do we now say the community of the Luos have IP of these words data because all of us borrowed a bit of our community to put it in these words? Okay. Or do we say, because Lillian, I'm the PI of the project, I paid all of you 2,000 to record yourself 2 hours. It is now me, Lillian, who owns the data as the what? The PI. I'm the one who has put it together and made this what? Corpus. And I'm the one going to build the model. So I'm the one who owns the what? I will write there, can corpus data built by Lillian. The owner of the data. So the question is now, who really owns these things? Well, the government can come and say, language is our culture, it's our heritage. So in principle, it's a Kenya what? Corpus. It doesn't belong to Lillian, it belongs to, so it's a public good for the whole community and should be there for what? For free. But now who compensates? Who gets, if it is used to build a model and we get some commercialization, who gets paid for it? Who gets the returns? Will this go back to the grandmother or my sister who recorded it? Or will I pocket it as Lillian the PI? Or will Kenya take it as it's a DPI, goes to the Kenyan government pool of what? Funds, yeah? So it's a whole conundrum of who owns these things. And how can we structurally have a way that us as the community and owners of the data in a way that it is not exploited? If, for instance, I say Bill Gates funds $2,000 to collect it, does it belong to Bill Gates? Because they're funded as 2,000. They can say, yes, we funded you. Okay, so it's owned by what? By Bill Gates. But I went to my community to collect it, and they also have a petition checked it, and the government. So we're having another discussion. It's still not yet there, but it has to be decided and really talked about so that we really, as Melissa said, it doesn't become a second wave of colonization. It doesn't become a second wave of exploitation. Okay, at the end of the day, the issue of who owns the data that is going to use to fuel the AI systems is really a discussion we're having. So we have been funded by DIS. So unfortunate that to discuss, to have the discussion of who owns the data. Yet it is us who are supposed to fund ourselves to discuss who owns the data. Yeah. So it's really a failure as the owners of the language. If you have to be paid to discuss who owns our world.
All right. I hope you know who owns the data now. That is my parting remark. Thank you for staying for this session and this study between you and lunch hour. I'm really grateful. I hope you learned something. And you can always come and reach out to us, ask questions, because we want to be active, not passive recipients to this discussion. Thank you so much. And the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. I think lunch is ready, so thank you. Yeah, thank you also. Oh, pictures. Okay.
Just take the
Linda, I just pull out. Okay. Did I just plug it out? Yes, yes. Let me read it so I can just.
This is the tube.
This one is bent thing. Do you have another one? This thing bends, Linda. I don't know. Okay, let me leave.